The book actually is born out of my teaching practice. So for about a decade, I've been teaching classes that are in different combinations of race and education or education policy or things like that, in lots of different settings. So for colleges, college students, master students, PhD students, and in telling those stories, when you make a syllabus, something that's cool about being a scholar who teaches is when you make a syllabus, you're kind of weaving together an argument because implicitly you're telling students, this is what you need to know. And you're also making an argument about the order things should go into. You're kind of telling a story. And when I started making these syllabi, even a decade ago when I very first started, I decided relatively quickly that I didn't think that my students really understood what schooling meant in the United States if they didn't understand what schooling meant for two of these groups of people that were, whose mistreatment were so much at the core of how the United States came to be what it is today. And so I felt like, a lot of the textbooks that I was assigned when I was getting my teacher licensure and things like that, a lot of times, like the stories of people of color and our educational experiences were kind of over here on the margins or not really mentioned. And I felt like, no, you actually don't understand the story if you don't understand the history of schooling for Black people. If you don't understand the history of schooling for Native people, you actually don't understand schools. Not just for like any representational issue or to make people feel good, but because it's actually a massive historical omission. And so I started designing my classes that way. And I would call the first couple of weeks of class original sins. And every year I was like, oh, I guess I'll assign a little bit from this book and a little excerpt from this text and here and there. And then we'll discuss this in class. And I was always asking my colleagues, is there a good book I can assign that synthesizes everything the way I want it to? And there wasn't. So I've been working on writing one and I finally pulled it off. Miseducation is in the subtitle of the book. And that's a nod both to, Miss Lauren Hill for the fans out there, but also to Carter G. Woodson. And Carter G. Woodson, when he wrote The Miseducation of the Negro, and he's the person who invented what became Negro History Week, which then became Black History Month. And one of the things he said is, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said lynching actually begins in the classrooms because if you teach people in school that they're worthless, if you teach people that their lives are worthless, but also if you teach other people that those folks' lives are worthless, right? Then you create the foundation for a society in which some people don't have to be treated as human beings with souls, right? And so really what the book is about is the ways that the schooling system in the United States has never been ideologically neutral. It's never been politically neutral. And over the course of history, it has served very specific purposes for the powerful over the course of, centuries. And specifically, the book, it really focuses on the intertwined history of the way that Black people have been treated in schooling spaces and the ways that Native people have been treated in schooling spaces. And the very short version of something that, obviously I could talk about at great length is that in order for the United States to justify the ongoing theft of the land that belonged to Indigenous peoples and the incredible acts of violence against them that facilitated that theft, and in order to be able to justify the enslavement of Black people who were held in bondage and whose labor and bodies and children and sacrifice literally, built the infrastructure of the country that we live in today. If you're going to tell yourself that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, and that all men are created equal, and then at the same time you want to look around and see these obvious atrocities against humankind that are taking place right in front of you, that's a cognitive dissonance that you need to reconcile. And part of what the book argues is that school does a really good job of helping people to do that. And it does that by saying, well, these Native people, they were always doomed to disappear. That's just their fate, right? They're all gone now. And it's really sad, but, we couldn't fulfill our destiny as a great country, a great leader of the world, if we didn't, say goodbye to them and the savagery and barbarism in which they were living. And, the other thing is that when slavery ends, you have millions of Black people that you still need to work for you under oftentimes very subjugating and unequal circumstances. And so you do that by telling them that this is their lot in life, that it's your job to be subservient. It's your job to show up and do the work that we need you to do, often for very low wages or no wages. And so schooling really takes on those two specific roles of creating the myth that Black people always are destined to occupy this lowest rung of society, and that Native people are destined to not exist anymore. And so that's the miseducation to which the title refers. And that's something that's obviously not only harmful to Black children, to Native children, but to children of all backgrounds whose, parents want them to be raised with different ideology, different values than that. But unfortunately, that's the dehumanization is really part and parcel of a lot of people's schooling experiences. Because of the work that I do, I have been really humble and honored for the whole time I've been an author, which I guess is, almost 8 years now at this point, to partner with teachers and collaborate with teachers a lot. And so I get invited to a lot of events where teachers are. And, I do a lot of workshops with teachers. And so in writing the book, I did so with the faith and the desire that teachers, but also community members, family members, parents, young people, activists, right? I thought, okay, people can handle the truth, right? My job is to capture that truth, to get it on paper, especially at a time when doing so is, closer than ever before to just being subject to punishment, outright punishment. And not only that, but that, when we see things like the federal government just erasing data sets from websites or forbidding people from teaching certain content, right? Again, my job as an author, as somebody who goes to the sources of these things, is to just make sure that it's there, that it's preserved, that it's there for people to talk about. But I knew from my years of touring all around the country and in some cases the world to talk to different educators, I thought, okay, I'm going to be able to put down the ball and they're going to pick it up, right? And so really what I hope for with this book is that people in community with each other get together, that they do study groups, that they do reading groups, that they share an excerpt and discuss it, that they do the audiobook, right? And I know that the connections that they're going to make with this history are so profound and so beyond what I could even imagine. And so that's where the real work of the book begins. It's kind of like it's my little paper boat that I cast out onto the river, knowing that somebody else is going to pick it up and do something phenomenal with it.